Sounds like you just cut him off. It's not hearing.
Oh, Joel's here.
Very good.
Hi, Joel.
Hello, Joel. And you're
Oh, we have a
speaking.
minion.
Wow.
And the password worked today.
That's because you used the right one, Leah.
No, we made
That's
enough
'cause he
of a
changed
fuss
it.
last week.
Alex
tried
changed it.
to clarify and unify. We're doing our best here.
Keeping up with the times. It's not always easy, Alex, I could tell you.
It's not. Who knew?
Yeah,
Yeah, changing passwords is always tough.
yeah.
Man, I definitely envy you all a little bit that you didn't have to go outside this morning. I'm sure some of you chose to. I bet you I'm not the only one who's left the house so far, but
I went walking yesterday after the snow.
yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's
Icy
beautiful.
though, it's too slippery.
Yeah.
I bet you it's a lot more beautiful to observe from your window in your sweatpants than it is to venture out into
Wow,
the cold and wait for the car to defrost.
Yeah. Well, at least you didn't have to walk all the way
It's
or
true.
whatever.
No, I was very appreciative yesterday when it was, nasty and cold out. I had 3 different meetings throughout the day, but I was, in warm cup of tea in my sweatpants in my dining room all day, and it was great.
Remote working is something that I appreciate all the time.
Yeah.
Judy, did you get snow in New York?
No,
You didn't?
No, 'cause it veered off to the
Not
south.
even a flurry.
Oh.
My friend in New Hampshire just got a dusting.
Yeah, my brother and way up in Maine, they didn't get anything. It was a band that hit New England, but southern New England.
Just Massachusetts.
Well, I think Rhode Island got some
Ah.
too.
Yeah, I was really surprised that New Hampshire didn't get much.
Their time will come.
Yeah. It's good.
Halloween snow.
I think it's gonna be a long winter.
Although the weatherman said when we get early snow, it's the history, which is not much history, but usually it's not as snowy
Not so
for the
bad,
rest of the
yeah.
winter.
I heard that too, Michael. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is I remember a big snowstorm in October in 2011, and yet all the reports I'm hearing are telling us that this one set records for October. It was nothing
Yeah.
like that one. That was much worse.
That was really, really wet and heavy and
Yes.
took down a lot of limbs.
Yes, and there were plows out, and I mean, it was a whole thing. So I don't understand how that slipped under the radar.
It's Boston, I think. Maybe Boston got like 4 inches.
Yeah, but
probably more.
that
This-
in 2011, we were actually in Boston. It was actually Debbie Parati's wedding, Debbie and I.
Oh,
In the midst of that blizzard, and we were down there, debating with Marissa and Todd, should we stay in their hotel room with them or try to drive back to Newbury?
yeah.
And we followed a plow all the way
Wow.
up the highway.
Well,
So I remember it well, and I don't know why they're not saying anything about it.
2011, I was living in Ipswich. I don't remember. I just don't remember when it snowed.
Yeah, no, this one is a vivid memory. We're like, are we going to make it all the way up or not?
Yeah, I remember it too. We had some Halloween decorations out front and I took pictures because we had all these branches of trees. Literally, you could barely see the decorations down.
Yeah, that was a heavy, wet, nasty one.
And the leaves were on, so that's why it was so bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
right. Remember, we had one of those.
Well,
Right, so we have a menu.
We do.
Yeah,
Well, I guess we can get going then. I usually wait till 9:35, but it seems like one minute quick won't bother anyone this morning. Thank you all for being here, and it's nice to see you all. And as always, nice to catch up a little bit, and nice to enjoy a little bit of sunshine. You all know how bright this room is, so I practically can't look to the right of me for fear of being blinded. So it's nice to. And the heat's kicking in, and the building is still kicking, so it's good to be inside and warm and together in whatever ways we are together. I want to start this morning with a reading from Judy Chicago, who I know is familiar to us, both in her work and also by her. What is it? She's a cousin of. Sorry, go ahead and I always forget.
She's
Sister-in-law.
married to John's brother.
Yeah. Okay. So
His sister-in-law.
close connection to John and Betsy Woodman and our community. And she has a poem called "A Vision for the Future," which is just particularly speaking to me this morning, and I hope that we can listen to the words and kind of carry it with us throughout the week a little bit. So this is Judy Chicago's "A Vision for the Future." And then all that has divided us will merge, and then compassion will be wedded to power, and then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind, and then both men and women will be gentle, and then both women and men will be strong, and then no person will be subject to another's will, and then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many, and then all will share equally in the earth's abundance, and then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old, and then all will nourish the young, and then all will cherish life's creatures, and then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth, and then everywhere will be called Eden once again. Obviously, this week is going to be a tense and strange and kind of unpredictable week, but I hope that we're able to kind of approach this week with whatever hope we're able to muster and really look towards a vision of the future with some of those, peaceful and unification aspects that Judy Chicago is writing about. So I hope we're able to take that sentiment with us, both for the rest of, a sunny Saturday on the last day of October, and really, heading into November and the rest of the week and the rest of the year. So with that being said, we'll begin our services this morning. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and we will start, as always, with Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu, Lecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma Tovu, Lecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. And we'll continue with Birchot HaShachar, which is on page 65. If you would like, please rise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan savivina levchim ben yom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'yaif koach. Praised are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, removing sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids. And we'll continue with the concluding paragraph of the Psalm for Shabbat. I invite you to sing along from home. Tzadik Hatamar. Tzadik Hatamar yifrach kerez balvanon yiske shetulim bebeit Adonai. Bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu o genuvun v'seiva deshenim verananim yiyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai Tsuri velo avlatabo. And we'll continue in just a moment with our first mourner's Kaddish of the day. I'll give you all the opportunity to unmute yourselves if you would like to join me in the mourner's Kaddish or just to say the responsive parts. Yitkadal,
Yikadash
Shnei
Shnei
Rabbah,
Rabbah, Yomah Divrah Kivrtei, Yamlik Malkutei, Bechaye Kon, Yomechon, Uchaye de Kol Beit Yisrael, Bagala, Bizman Kari, Vimru Amen.
Eish Rav
Barak Yomam Olamei Omaya.
Yitbarach
Yiparak, Vishtabak, Vipar, Vit Romam, Vit Naseh, Vit Adar, Vit Alev, Vit Alal, Shemay, Dekutsha, Bariku.
Brichu
Le'elo min kol, Birkata, Vishirata, Nekamata, Damiran, Bioma, Vibru, Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom Bimamav, Huyaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru
Amen.
Amen.
And we will go back on mute and we will continue on the next page with Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam baruch hu baruch oseh v'reishit baruch omer ve'oseh Baruch gozer u'mekayem Baruch merachem al-haaretz Baruch merachem al-habriot Baruch meshalem sachar tov lireav Baruch chayla v'kayam lanetzach Baruch podeh u'matzil Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shemo. Praised are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, compassionate creator, extolled by your people, glorified by your faithful servants. We laud you with the psalms of your servant David. We extol you in song. We celebrate your fame and melody. We proclaim you sovereign, singular, eternal God. Praised are you, Adonai, sovereign, magnified with songs of praise. And if you are standing, you may be seated. We'll continue singing together Psalm 150, the Hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekodsho, hallelujah, hallelujah, Birki Auzo, hallelujah, 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 big Vurotav, hallelujah, hallelujah, Kerov Gudlo, hallelujah, 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 Beteka shofar, hallelujah, hallelujah, Benevel vechinor, hallelujah, 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 Betof umachol, hallelujah, hallelujah, Beminim veugav, hallelujah, 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 betil tzele shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, betil tzele trua. Kol hanshama tehalel hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehalel hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehalel hallelujah. We'll continue with the beginning of Az Yashir. If you would like, please rise. Az Yashir Moshe Uvenei Yisrael et Ashira Hazot Adonai Vayomru Lehemor Ashira Adonai Kigoga Sus Verachvo Rama Vayam Ozi vezimratya vayihili lishua ze'eli ve'anvehu Elohei aviv aromenhu. We continue in the middle of the next page. Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Ki l'Adonai mocha Moshe b'goyim, ba'alu Moshe b'artzon l'shvot et harisav, v'yital Adonai ha'melucha, v'hay Adonai l'melcha kol haaretz, v'yomar li Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. And we're going to skip forward a couple pages to the middle of page 105. If you are standing, you may be seated. El betachimot uzecha, hagadol bichod shemecha, hagibor lanetzach, fanarabi noratecha, hamelech hayoshev, al kisei ram v'nisa, shochenad marom, v'kadosh shemaho, v'chatuv ranu tzadikim b'Adonai, l'shrim navatila, Befi sharim titala, udivrei tzadikim titbarach, uvilshon chasim titromam, uvekerev kedoshim titkadash, uvemakalot rivivot amcha beit Yisrael. V'nai prashim chamokein b'chol dor vador, shekein chovat koritzim lefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Leodot Lalel, Shabech Lefaer, Leromem Lader Vrech Leo Kales, Al kol direi shiro v'tishbachot, David ben Yishai, Abdecha meshichecha. And we rise for Yishtabach. Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu. Hayal HaMelech HaGadol v'Kadosh v'Hashamayim v'Aretz. Ki lecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Evoteinu, shir shlacha halav v'zimra. Oz memshan etzak l'agvara, tilad tiferet, tusha u'malchut. Brachot ve'hodaot, me'tav yad olam, baruch atah Adonai. El melech gadol b'tishbachot, el haodot, Adonai niflot, habocher b'shrei zimra, melech elchei haolamim. I invite you to unmute to respond to the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Pirtei v'amlich malchutei, v'chayachon v'machon v'chay l'chol Beit Yisrael, b'agol ha'rizman kariv, v'imru
Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbo Mevorach, Le'olam Olamim Omayah.
V'yitabach, v'yitbar v'sham v'naseh, v'yitadar v'toiv shmei l'kudusha, b'rich. Ilan mikol bechata v'shirata, tushchata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma, v'imru
Amen.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Yotzer vorei choshech, oseh shalom, uvorei et hakol. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, creating light and fashioning darkness, ordaining the order of all creation. And if you are still standing, you may be seated. We'll continue at the bottom of the page with Ein Kirkecha, followed by El Adon. Ein Kirkecha Adonai Eloheinu ba'olam hazeh, ve'en zolatecha malkeinu lechayei ha'olam haba. Efes biltecha golenu mot HaMashiach, ve'enu melech HaMoshienu l'tchiyat ha'metim. El Adon al kol ha'masim, baruch u'mvorach befi kol neshama, gadlo v'tuvo, Male olam da'at utfuna sovev imoto. Amitka chayot hakodesh v'nehedar b'chavo lahamerkava zechut umishor lifnei chiso chesed rachamim lifnei kevodo. Toviv meyorot shebara Eloheinu yitzaram beda'at bevina ufaskel koach ugvura natan bahem liot moshlim bekerev tevel meleim ziv umfikim noga naezivam bechol ha'olam Semechin betzeitan vesasin bevoam osim b'yei maretzon konam pe'er v'chavod notnim lishmo tavla verina lezecher malchuto kara lashemesh vayizrach or ra'a vehitkin surat havana Shevach notnim lo kol tzeva marom tiferet ugedula srafim ve'ofanim ve'chayot hakodesh Ein, 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 ein. Ein nein 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 nein. We'll continue at the bottom of page 110. Let's sing together the Or Chadash. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir, Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir. Veniske kulanu mehera leoro. Veniske kulanu mehera leoro. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. And we'll continue at the top of page 111 together in the English. Deep is your love for us, Adonai our God, boundless your tender compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, you taught our ancestors life-giving laws. They trusted in you. For their sake, graciously teach us. Our Maker, merciful provider, show us mercy, grant us discernment and understanding. Then will we study your Torah, heed its words, teach its precepts, and follow its instruction, lovingly fulfilling all its teachings. Open our eyes to your Torah, help our hearts cleave to your mitzvot, unite all our thoughts to love and revere you. Then we will never be brought to shame, for we trust in your awesome holiness and will delight in your deliverance. Bring us safely from the four corners of the earth and lead us in dignity to our holy land, for you are the source of deliverance. You have called us from all peoples and tongues, constantly drawing us near to you, that we may lovingly offer you praise, proclaiming your oneness. Praised are you, Adonai, who loves the people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'amo Yisrael b'ahava. I invite you to unmute and to join me together in the Shema and the B'ahavta.
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shem Kavod Malchusol Elom Loed.
Hey, Adonai Elohekol, the call of calls, call nafshakol, the call meodekol. You Hadvorim Oela Asherochi Mitzavko Hayom Alevaveko Shinaton Neko Vedimantamam Vishipur Deteko Leko Baderek Yipokumeko Shoton Leo Tal Yodeko Behoyu Litotoko Beneneko Utaftom Amzobeteko Vishareko
Vehaya im shamot vishmo mitzvotai asher anochi mitzavetchem hayom liahavat Adonai Elohechem ulavdo v'chol olavchem v'chol nafshechem v'netati mitzartzechem v'torah makosh ve'asavta diganecha v'tiroshcha v'tzarecha v'natati esav b'sadcha v'vemtecha ve'achalta v'savata Yishamru lachem penyiftelu avchem v'sartem v'avaratem Elohim acherim yishtachavitem lahem v'charaf Adonai bachem v'atzar et hashamayim v'yeh matar v'ha'adama lo titen et tivula v'avaratem meheira me'al ha'aretz hatova she'Adonai rotem lachem v'samtem et dvarai ele alavavchem al nashechem Ukshartem otam leot ayetchem, vayul totafot beinenechem, limadatem otam epnechem daber bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, v'lechtecha b'aderech, v'shachvecha v'kumecha, uchtavtam, amezuzot beitecha v'isharecha, leman yirbu imechem imei v'nechem, al ha'adama asher nishba Adonai, Avotechem latet lahem ki me'ashamayim al haaretz. Vayomer Adonai Moshe lemor daber al bnei Yisrael ve'amarta lehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei b'ydehem udorotam v'natnu al tzitzit kakanaf v'til techelet vayalachem Letzitzit, Ritem Oto, Ushkartem et Kol Mitzvot, Adonai Vasitem Otam, Velo Taturu, Acharei Levavchem, Acharei Einechem, Asher Atem Zonim Achareihem, Leman Tizkeru, Vasitem et Kol Mitzvotai, Vitem Kedoshim Lelohechem, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher tzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem emet. Adonai Elohechem emet. And in just a moment, we'll continue in the middle of page 114 with Mi Chamocha. We'll then begin the Amidah together. We'll come unmuted for the Kedusha, and then we'll take a couple minutes for silent prayer and meditation and reflection. Tehillah Elyon Baruch Hu Barach Moshe Miriam Uvnei Yisrael Lechanu Shira B'Simcha Rabah Ve'amru Chulam Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai Mi Kamocha Nedar B'Kodesh Nora tehilot osef eleh Shira chadasha shilchugu l'shimcha sfat hayam Yachad kulam hoduvim lichu ve'amaru Adonai imloch leolam va'ed Tzur Yisrael kuma be'ezrat Yisrael Uvdechinu mecha Yehuda ve'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzvot shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imoteinu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
Kadesh Shim Kol Be'olam Kishem Shemak Shim Moto Bishmei Moron Kakotu Vayad V'Yakov V'Korah Zeh El Zeh V'Yomar
Kadesh Shimcha ba'olam Kishem Moto Bishmei Moron Kakotu Vayad V'Yakov V'Korah Zeh El Zeh V'Yomar.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavot, Meloko Ha'oretz Kavodo. Oz Bekol Rosh Gadol, Adir B'Chazot Mashmim Kol Minasim Umasarafim. Lumatam Baruch Yomeru.
אז בכל רעש גדול בדרך חזק משמיעים קול, אז בכל רעש גדול בדרך חזק משמיעים קול, מתנשאים למטרפים, למטרפים, יומתם ברוך יאמרו.
Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimkomo. Mimakomachom Malkeinu Tofia Vitim Lokolenu. Ki Mechatim Anachnu Lot. Matai Timot Zion. Bekorobi Omenu Lelam Voed Tishkon. Tikadal V'tikadash V'tok Yerushalayim Ircha. Lador Vodor Netzach Nitzotim.
במקום חמקינו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו לעולם ותשכון. תתקדש ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור לנצח נצחים.
V'yeneinu tirena malkutecha ador amor b'shirecha
על ידי דוד משיח צדקך.
yimlok Adonai leolam Elohai Zion לדור ודור hallelujah.
ודור ודור נגיד גודלך, ונצח צחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפנוי משלום בד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimeru amen. And we'll continue with the full Kaddish. Once again, I'll invite anyone who wants to unmute themselves to be able to respond to the Kaddish. Yitkala v'yikadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Alma divrach mikei v'amich malchutei b'chayichon v'yamachon chay d'chol beit Yisrael v'agala b'zman kariv v'yimeru amen.
Yishmei Yivara.
Who's Jenny?
Elam mikol b'chatav shiratat, shchatav nechamatat, amiran be'alma v'yimeru
Amen.
Kabal tzorot hon b'chol beit Yisrael, kadam v'hon debishmaya v'yimeru
Amen.
Yehi shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru Shalom imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yishrei tevel v'yimeru
Amen.
And we will remute ourselves with the exception of Barry Pastor, who can unmute himself again if he doesn't mind. And we'll see how his internet is working this morning as we transition into the Torah service.
Lots of luck.
I'll back you up, Barry. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm not worried. Ein kamocha b'elim Adonai v'ein k'mashecha malchusecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yitein. Adonai yivarech esamo v'shalom. Avorachamim. Eitiva v'tzon Sion. Tivnei Chomos Yerushalayim, Ki v'chol levad b'tochnu, Melech el Ram benisa, Adon olamim. Ma yehi ben so Aharon, ma yomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei sorah. Ki mitzion tetzei sorah, u'devar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenasan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenasan Torah, Torah. Liamo Israel, B'Kedusha so.
Thank you very much, Barry. Anyone who is standing may be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's nice to see my screen so full with so many boxes, including, of course, a couple visitors from Riverdale who still do not have Saturday morning services. I'm overjoyed to have them joining us, and also want to thank our CAA regulars for opening our doors in the way we usually like to open our physical doors, and making that, a wider opening as well when we're online. And just to introduce Hank and Betty Gollum, who I don't think have joined us before. To my memory, Hank is the last person whose shoulders I ever rode on during Simchas Torah dancing, when I was likely too old and too heavy to be riding on anybody's shoulders. I distinctly remember being on top of Hank's shoulders. So it's good to see both of them, and welcome, and Shabbat Shalom also to you, Deb. Thanks to our New York contingent. This morning we're going to be reading from Parshat Lecha. And as we all know, Parshat Lecha is an incredibly busy parsha, and a lot happens, and there's a lot of themes that we get in this parsha that really continue throughout the rest of the 5 books of the Torah. We have things like Abraham going down to Egypt, which is obviously, and a famine, which are both things that get repeated in this parsha. We of course also have the birth of Ishmael through Abraham's concubine Hagar, and so we have the first time we really see this. Well, I don't know if it's the first time or not, because it depends how you look at Cain and Abel, but we get the start of these like intense family tensions and sibling rivalries that will really be a theme all throughout the rest of the Torah. And of course, we have Abraham entering explicitly into not one but 2 different covenants with God. One where he takes the animals and he splits them in 2 and kind of walks between them, and then later on in the parsha, we of course also have the commandment for circumcision, and Abraham circumcising himself and his whole camp and his 13-year-old son Ishmael. I should also just clarify, because I run into this every year for most of this parsha, Abraham and Sarah, this is before their names get changed. So as we'll read in the text, it's Avram and Sarai, Abraham and Sarai, not Abraham and Sarah. But it's really hard to not trip up on that, since most of how we know them is of course as Abraham and Sarah, as Abraham and Sarah. I'm not going to talk too long right now, because I know we have, I plan on pausing a couple times during the reading, both to point some things out, and also I know we have 2 different yortzites that we want to say al males for, so we will be pausing, and we'll of course have opportunities for discussion. But just to frame as we go through the parsha, we'll pick up this morning at the beginning of chapter 14, because that's where we are in the triennial cycle, and this is, we've skipped the Lech Lecha part, right? Like last year we read the go out from your home and your homeland and your parents' home to the land that I will show you. This year we're figuring out, we're picking up where Abram has already kind of settled with his nephew Lot going down to Stone, and then there's this war of the 5 kings and the 4 kings, and Abram the warrior kind of coming in to save the day. And I guess just the way I want to frame the reading this morning is really to kind of go through the full narrative very quickly, from the beginning of the parsha to the end of the parsha, and just think of all the different aspects which Abram embodies in this story. So first we have Abram the wanderer, or the follower, I guess I should say, who hears God's call and just kind of ups and leaves, which is followed by Abram the trickster, as he goes down to Egypt and kind of lies to the king there about who his wife is, and says it's his sister, and it winds up being, the king of Egypt gets punished by God and finds out, and then kind of sends them back on their way with great riches. Next, we kind of see Abram, the real estate agent, who is, looking out with his nephew Lot over the whole land and figuring out how they're going to split things up so that everyone can have enough to feed their growing camps. And then, of course, in the aftermath of that, we have Abram the warrior in this battle of the 5 kings versus the 4 kings, the mighty man who swoops in to kind of tip the balance of power and save his nephew Lot. And it's really after his return from this war that Abraham really becomes the man of God. This is where we get the first covenant of the Parsha, the covenant between the pieces, and really kind of the solidification of this relationship with God. And then after that, it truly becomes kind of Abram, the troubled family man, as we see the tensions rising between his wife and his concubine, and the birth of his first son Ishmael, and Hagar being forced to leave the house, and just all the jealousy and rivalries that really kind of build up and become characteristic certainly of the rest of the book of Genesis, to say nothing of the rest of the Torah. And I think it's just really interesting to read, when we don't read the text closely, and I think we've all kind of been here before, so I don't necessarily expect that the people, in this room will be struggling with this so much, but when we don't read the text closely and we just rely on kind of our traditions and our faith traditions, we see Abraham as this really exalted character, right? Who we should all be emulating in every respect. And it's only when we read the text closely, and when we discuss it together as a group, that we really see all the complexities, all the different facets, all the flaws that sometimes it's easy to kind of glide over, but really there is a whole lot more to be explored here than just our great and mighty forefather Abraham and his beautiful and meritorious wife Sarah, right? Like, both of these characters are infinitely more complex and troubled, and really need a little bit more dissection than a simple gliding over will give us. And a lot of this is based, right in the text, but I think a close reading is a really valuable asset here to us. Any comments or questions on any of this before we dive into Parshat Lecha? I know it's stories we've all heard before. Great. So I think we will with that, we'll begin. As always, like I said, there's a couple different things that I plan on stopping to highlight. But if there's anything that catches your eye that you want to ask or talk about, feel free to put something in the chat, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on that, and keep you get your voices and thoughts in as well. With that being said, I invite everyone to unmute one more time, and we'll begin the Torah reading with La'asok b'divrei Torah all together, and then we'll start with chapter 14. Baruch
Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu v'mitzvotav hitzivanu
La'asok b'divrei
la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Amen. Vayhi bimei Amraphel melech Shinar, Aryoch melech Elasar, Kedar Lomar melech Elam, Vatidal melech Goyim, Asu milchama, Ed Bera melech Stom, Vet Birsha melech Amorah, Shinav melech Adma, Beshem Ever melech Tvoim umelech Bela hitzoar, Kol ele chavru el emek hasidim, Huyam hamelach. Shtem esrei shana avdu et kedar lomar. Ushlosh esrei shana maradu uva esrei shana ba kedar lomer. Vahamlachim asher ito vayaku et Rephaim vashterot karnaim vetazuzim beham ve'et ha'enim beshavei kiryatayim vetachori beharhar seir ad el paran asher al hamidbar vayashuvu vayavohu elain mishpat kadesh Vayaku et kol stei ha'amaleki vegam et ha'amori hayoshev b'chatzitzon Tamar. Vayetze melech Sdom umelech Amora umelech Adma umelech Tzvoim umelech Bela Hitzoar vayarchu itam milchama be'emek hasidim. Eit kedar lomar melech elam vatidal melech goyim amrafel melech shinar ve'aryoch melech elasar arba melachim et hachamisha ve'emek hasidim be'erot chemar vayanusu melech Sdom v'amora vayiplu shama v'hanisharim Heranasu vaichu et kol rechush Sedom v'Amora v'et kol ochlam vailechu vaichu et Lot v'et rechusho ben achi Avram vailechu v'hu yoshev b'Sdom vayavo hapalit vayagid Avraham ha'ivri v'hu shochen belonei mamrei ha'emori Achi eshkol v'achi einar v'hem baalei berit Avram vayishma Avram ki nishba achiv vayarek et chanichav yelidei beito 18 vayirdof adan vayachalek aleihem lailahu v'avadav vayakem Vayerdefim ad chova asher mismol ledamesek vayashev et kol harechush vegam et Lot achiv urechusho heshiv vegam et hanashim et ha'am vayitze melech Sdom likrato acharei shuvo mehakot et kedar lo et Kedar lomer v'tamlachim asher ito el emek shavei hu emek hamelech umalki tzedek melech shalem hotzi lechem v'yayin v'hu chohen la'el elyon vayivarchehu vayomer baruch Avram le'el elyon koneh shamayim v'aretz Uvaroch el elyon asher migin tzarecha biadecha vayiten lo maser mikol. So we're gonna take a break there for just one sec. There's two things I want to highlight. First of all, there's this interesting passage that we just finished on, which I'm going to talk about after we finish the Torah reading this morning about Malchi Tzedek. I just want to kind of highlight his qualifications. And King Malchi Tzedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High, which is just a really interesting this way for someone to be described when, you know, in this first parsha where we really have Abraham and Sarah being made distinct by their belief in, you know, what is described as a God Most High. And so what exactly, who is this King Malchi Tzedek, and what exactly does he believe in, and how is he similar or different to Abraham? And the other thing I just want to highlight is a couple verses earlier, and I'm going to stop the screen real quick. A couple verses earlier in verse 13, We have this: a fugitive brought the news to Abram the Hebrew, Vayavo hapalit ve'aged la'Avram ha'ivri. And this, again, we're talking about like distinctions and kind of the beginning of separation and specialness. And this is the first time we really have Abram distinguished as kind of a separate tribe, right? He's referred to as an Ivri, which we come to associate with Ivri, with Hebrews, and all of these kind of unique distinguishers. But it's not actually clear what it means in this context. It's just kind of an identifying word. Mom, do you have something to say about that? You got on mute.
Yeah, I'm just, I have one of your old chumashim from when you were a kid, and it has Rashi here, and Ha'ivri says that he came from across the river. That's a meaning there. Yeah.
And again, to think about kind of distinct separation, I think, is what across the river means here. Like there's this war involving 9 kings. There's a lot of kind of like conflict and I don't know what word I'm looking for, but there's a lot of kind of controversy around Lot going to live with Sdom, right? Like the people of Sdom and Amorah are really known to be like the worst of the worst, and Abraham's nephew goes to live with them. And there really is this kind of distinction, both like geographical and spiritual, between Abram right now and the rest of the world, right? Like he is not part of all this chaos. He's not part of all that bad behavior. He is the Ivri. And Ivri at this point doesn't mean Hebrew. It doesn't mean Jew. It means like he is separated from all that. And I think that's where Rashi's going with that. Deb, was that a hand? Are you unmuting yourself? You got to unmute yourself, and then love to hear what you have to say.
Yes, it was a hand, because reading this brings something back personally. My husband was an attorney, and one of his clients, a Black man, came to him and asked if he could process a name change. And his name was the equivalent of John Smith. It was a common American name. And my husband said, "Why do you want the name change?" And he said, "Because I am converting to Judaism." And my husband said, "And what name did you choose?" And he said, Melchizedek Smith, which is sort of odd. And my husband asked him why. And he said, "Because I'm going over from baptism to Judaism." So there we are.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And I think the same as you did last week, Deb, you're kind of foreshadowing some of the things that I want to talk about after the Torah reading in more of like the sermonish time. So I'm not going to go too deep into it. But yeah, I mean, I think Melchizedek really is one of these mysterious figures who kind of seems to be venerable, right? Like he seems to be a good guy and God-fearing, but we also only get these 3 verses of him, and it's a beautiful name. I mean, it means like King of Righteousness. It's
Sounds
definitely
peculiar in English.
it's a good Hebrew biblical name. But yeah, it'll be interesting to look into that character a little bit more further on. So thank you for foreshadowing there. Yeah, Joel, please.
In Arya Kaplan's Chumash, he says from Ibn Ezra, Hebrew is sons of Eber, or the Eberites, sons of Eber.
Yeah, and this is definitely this whole part. If any of you have a copy of even our Chumash, of the Eitz Chaim, or if you want, I can give you all a link for it. They're still making it available parsha by parsha. If the rabbinical assembly is, if you want to take a closer look at the text that we usually use, a lot of what's happening in the commentary in the Eitz Chaim this week is taking these 9 names and all these places and all these kings and like cross-referencing other historical records that we have, right? So it's not, so this little section here especially is kind of like Torah, not just as the foundational story of Judaism, but also Torah as a little bit of a history book. And there are parts here that do overlap with other historical records from the time. There are parts here that are completely different from other historical records of the time, but it is always, you know, not my scholarly forte, but it is always interesting to see how the story of the Torah fits into you know, that historical record and that historical context. And the Eitz Chaim says something similar in their note on the Hebrew. Many scholars relate the term to the nomadic mixed ethnic group called Hapiru in ancient Near Eastern documents. The origin and meaning of the term Ivri is unclear. So yeah, we have kind of the traditional Rashi interpretive side of things who tries to make sense of it, and then we have like the actual kind of history book side of things, which tries to put it in context. And there's merit to both approaches. There are things to learn from both approaches. So we're going to pause here, and we are going to turn, I think just by the arbitrary order on my screen, I think we'll turn to Mike first, who is marking his father's yortzeit today. So I'm going to include an El Male for Mike's dad, and then I will give Mike a minute or two to reflect and share a little bit on his memory. El Male Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'Ma'alot Kedoshim Uteorim Kezor HaKiyam Masirim Et Nishmat Chaim Velvel Ben Baruch HaLevi V'Dora Shehalach le'olamo ba'avur shebli neder ten staka ba'avur she'anachnu mipalim ba'ad haskarat nishmato v'gan eden te menuchato lachin bal rachamim yastir b'seter knafav le'olamim v'yitzor v'yitzorachim en nishmato Adonai hu nachalato Ve'anuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. And Mike, I invite you to unmute, and if you'd like to share anything about your dad.
Yeah, there's a lot I could say about him, but first I want to say that today, or this time, is the 25th anniversary of the yortzeit of 25th yortzeit of Yitzhak Rabin. And also this around the time of the second anniversary of the people who were murdered at the Tree of Life Synagogue, which comes to my mind first and foremost now, even above my father, I think. So I mean, I could keep it very simple. My father loved me and I loved him. That could be the simplest thing I could say. He had a very complex life in my mind, and he was an enigma. He was secretive about a lot of things, but he expressed opinions on almost everything. So I guess he had various stages of his life. He had a very difficult childhood and a young adulthood. He was very bright. He graduated high school when he was about 16 from Central High School in Philadelphia, which was admission by exam only. And his brother, who was 18 months older, graduated at the same time as he did. And there was a sibling rivalry amongst all the brothers. There was another brother who came along a lot later. There were others that died young and all that. And my grandfather, had issues that pervade our family, and wasn't able to really provide for that family much. So getting along to the time when I was a child and I knew my father, Uh, he was very caring. He was a hardworking civil servant. He was an engineer, electrical, electronic, biomedical, as the technology and subjects changed over the years. He was, I would say he was a fan of the Soviet Union, which was unusual. He tried to teach me Russian. I wasn't so good at it, but we sat after at night and I learned Russian a little. Today I forget most of it. I try to think of how he would deal with circumstances today, our politics today, because even though he had anti-war, very left-wing views, and keep in mind that he grew up in the Depression, very poor, and that they lived in a part of Philadelphia where this was not uncommon. Remember, the Rosenbergs were there and were executed, and lived in the neighborhood where I first lived when I was until I was like 4 or 5 years old, and even after that. And I just don't know. He's an enigma. He had some racist views, definitely. So I don't know where he would be today because on these issues. So, I'm just raising questions about my father. So I will conclude. I loved him. He loved me. To me, he was very kind. And, he was this guy that was great to the family, basically, definitely, to my brothers, to me, to my mother. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for sharing, Mike. And, I think it sounds like your relationship with your father is still developing, which is exactly why, we take the time and put such a strong emphasis on memory in your site, because, it does, just because the physical life is gone doesn't mean that the role in our lives don't continue to develop and, continue for our own thoughts to really grow and develop alongside. And I do also want to thank you for bringing up both Yitzhak Rabin and reminding us that this past Tuesday actually was the anniversary of the Tree of Life shooting, and we did honor that on our Tuesday night adult ed class, but it definitely bears repeating and mentioning. So thank you, Mike. We are going to continue on in the Torah reading. We'll read a little bit more, and then I'll pause in another minute or two to share one more reflection, and then we'll also include another El Male for Jean's mom. So let me just pull the Torah reading back up. And we are on chapter 14, verse 21. Vayomer melech stom el Avram, tein li hanefesh v'harachush kach lach. Vayomer Avram el melech stom, harimoti yadi el Adonai, el elyon koneh shamayim va'aretz, im michut v'ad tzroch na'al, ve'im ekach mikol asher lach, ve'lo tomar ani hesharti et Avram, Biladai rak asher achlu hane'arim v'chelek hanashim asher halchu iti aner eshkol umamre hein yichlu chelkam achar hadvarim ha'eleh haya devar Adonai el Avram b'machazeh le'mor al tira Avram Anochi magein lach secharcha harbe meod. Vayomer Avram Adonai Elohim mati ten li vanochi holech ariri uven meshek beiti hu da meshek Eliezer. Vayomer Avram hein li lo natata zara v'hinei ven beiti yoreshoti. V'hinei devar Adonai elav le'mor lo yirashcha zeh ki im asher yetzei mimecha hu yirashecha vayotzei oto hachutza Vayomer habeit nahashamayma ushfor hakochavim im tuchal lispor otam. Vayomer lo ko yeh zarecha v'hemin b'Adonai vayichsheveh lo tzedakah. So just two quick things I want to highlight here. The first is going back to chapter 15, verse 1. It's always nice to kind of point out where things in our liturgy relate back to the Torah. And at the end of this verse, we have Anochi Magen Lach, God saying to Abraham, fear not, Abraham, I am a shield to you. And of course, we should all recognize that from the first blessing of the Amidah. This is where we pull this Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah from. So that just interesting to note kind of where exactly that roots back to. The other thing I just want to briefly kind of look at and bring into focus a little bit is this conversation between God and Abram and the relation to like material wealth and inheritance, right? Abram is obviously becoming a very wealthy person, and God is saying, I will make you wealthier. And he just came out of this weird interaction with the king of Sodom, where he kind of gives up a bunch of his wealth. And Abram's reaction to God is, what is the point of material wealth if I don't have an heir to hand it down to? And in the Midrash, again, we talk about kind of recurring themes and things that happen to both father and son. And there's also, there is a very interesting and similar story that takes place between, again, in the Midrash. So this is all kind of off the book, but a really interesting story that's recounted to Terach, Abraham's father, who basically, when Abram was born, there were kind of signs in the stars of the sky that kind of let everyone know that this world-changing child had been born. And Nimrod, who was the powerful king at the time, basically saw that as a bad portent to his own power. And, you know, whatever his powers or wizards kind of pointed him to Terach, to Abram's father, and said that, you know, this is the baby who is going to inherit the world and the world to come, and this is the baby who's a threat to you. And so Nimrod goes down to Terach, he goes down to Abraham's father and says, last night a son was born to you, give him to me that we may slay him, and I will fill your house with silver and gold. And Terach replies with a parable. A horse was told, let us cut off your head and we will give you a barn full of barley. The horse replied, you fools, if you cut off my head, who will eat the barley? And so there's both this, I think that both stories have this really wonderful undercurrent of like, what good is material wealth without kind of being able to hand the world down in a positive way to people who are coming afterwards, which I think is a really great message for us as well, right? Like what is the point of kind of advancing society if it comes at the cost of kind of destroying our environment, and what exactly are we leaving for future generations? And even though this is a midrash about Terach, Abraham's father, I really like the idea of just recurring, you know, more recurring themes from father to son, right? Like Abraham, you know, it's possible that Abraham is getting this really strong emphasis on family, on inheritance, on heritage, because that was something that was with him from his own birth, which is just bringing a little bit more kind of flavor to the story. Joel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it says he went out with 318 fighting men and defeated Hedor, Lamor, and his allied kings. 318? Those kings must have not had much of a fighting force.
Well, so it's interesting, right? So it's a 13-year war, I think. And the notes that I read said that actually 318 is a significant fighting force. I mean, you know, listen, obviously, if we're talking about 9 kings living in close enough proximity to each other to go to war for 14 years, we're not talking about like thousands and thousands of people. I think we're still talking about a very kind of tribal and small scale kings and kingdoms. And also, you know, you think about if someone's been at war for 13 years and a new troop comes in fresh, you know, without having all that exhaustion or all the other terrible things that come from soldiers being at war for a prolonged period, you can imagine how a small force would have a really disproportionate outcome. So those are kind of the couple angles that I think, you know, let us see what a force of 300 plus could do in that scenario. But it's a good question. And you know, as always, when we read numbers in the Torah, short of, you know, probably the couple scholars in the world who focus on numbers in the Torah, we should always take them with a grain of salt, because it is never entirely clear, you know, whether they are to be taken literally or metaphorically or representative or any of that. So, but a good question. So we're going to pause once more, and we are going to include another El Maleh, this time for Jean's mother. El Maleh Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei Hashchina V'malot Kedoshim Uteorim Kezor Harakia Masirin Et Nishmat Chana Bat Yitzchak V'Chasha שלחה לעולמה בעבור שאנחנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתה בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. לכן בעל רחמים יסתירה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים ויצרור בצרכים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן. And Jean, if you'd like to share anything about your mom, please feel free.
Yes, interesting, some of the comments when Michael was speaking, because I've also been each year, I feel like reconstructing my parents and who they were and their lives. And of course, there's so much that I can't know or will ever know. But always with increasing appreciation. And some of these things I've said before, I'll be brief. My mother was born in 1917 in New York. Her family had fled Russia, Western Russia. And she was born a twin, not an identical twin. And they were very poor and lived through the Depression. Met my father in high school, married very young. So her track in life was set for her at a fairly early age. But I know also that my mother was many-faceted and many-talented. And, you know, I think about all the what-ifs. But she was most essentially a loving mother. She was a beautiful woman, loved family, shy, but also social at the same time, which I'm still kind of trying to figure some of that out. And faced, as I guess most people in life do, many joys, but many challenges, problems with my father and some of his illness as life progressed. But I appreciate over time, in some ways, the solidity of my mother, because it seems like whatever the difficulty was, and I'm not saying that she was confident or didn't feel overwhelmed, yet she was always there. You know, she was in some ways the rock in the family ultimately when push came to shove. And I think I'll leave it at that right now.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jean, and for bringing her in with us this morning. We will now continue. We don't have too much of the Torah reading left, so we're going to pick up where we left off and go to the end of this morning's reading. And we are, for those of you with a Chumash, we are at the bottom of page. It doesn't have the page. We're on chapter 15, verse 7. Vayomer elav ani Adonai asher hotzeiticha meor kasdim latet lecha et haaretz hazot lerishta. Vayomar Adonai Adonai Bameida ki irashena. Vayomer elav kechali egla meshuleshet ve'ez mishulash ve'ayil mishulash ve'tor ve'gozal v'ikach lo et kol eile vayivater otam batavech vayiten ish pitro likrat re'ehu v'etatzipor lo vatar vayered ha'ait al hapkarim vayishev otam ovram vayhi hashemesh lavo v'tardema nafla al Avram V'hinei ema chashecha gdola nofelet alav vayomer l'Avram yado ateda ki ger yezaracha ve'eretz lo lahem v'abadum v'inu otam 400 shana v'gam et hagoy asher yavodu dan anochi ואחרי כן יצאו ברכוש גדול, ואתה תבוא לאבותיך בשלום, תיקבר בשיבה טובה, ודור רביעי ישובו הנה, כי לא שלם עוון המורי עד הנה, ויהי השמש באה ועלתה, היה והנה תנור עשן ולפיד אש אשר עבר בין הגזרים האלה ביום ההוא. קראת אדוני את אברהם ברית לאמור לזרעך נתתי את הארץ הזאת מן ההר מצרים עד הנהר הגדול נהר פרת את הקיני ואת כניזי ואת הקדמוני ואת החיתי ואת הפריזי ואת הרפאים ואת האמורי ואת הכנעני ואת הגרגשי ואת היבוסי. And of course, talk about foreshadowing and talk about things that will, come up again throughout our journey through the Torah. There we have for 400 years, your children will be slaves in Egypt, and that is really the driver in a lot of ways for the whole rest of the book. So we'll continue on with our stories. But for now, I would like to turn it over to Sharon to lead us through the healing service. And I'm not going to put the song up on the screen so that we can see each other as we sing the words to the healing service. Sharon, whenever you're ready.
Okay, and please join if you would like to and know the words. Mishe berach avotenu Mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. Mishe berach imotenu Mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Misha berach avotenu ve'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Moshe v'Aharon, David u'Shlomo, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, Bilha, v'Zilpah, Hu yivarech v'yirafeh et hacholim, B'nei Avraham v'Sarah, B'nei Adam v'Chava. May God, who blessed our ancestors, bless and heal all those in need of it now. Oh gosh. I mean, let's just really put our hearts and souls into this one, please. Healing for all the displaced children, healing for people who are suffering from fires and earthquakes, healing from people who are suffering from viruses, and healing for those who are suffering from unbelievable stress right now. And let's include the names we know and the names we don't know. The names that I have are Joan Lysick, Shoshana Bat Pinchas V'Chana, Meir Ben Fegev, Aaron Yitzchak, Dennis McNeely, Jess Kramer, Alexis Watson, Joel Gordon, May Daub, Bob Jelly, Bruce Mallory, Michael Cohn, Alan Mann, John O'Brien, Jacques Mansey, Carol Barker, Catherine Doloff, Ken Bosey, Chana Bat Rivka, Lorraine Daniluk, Denise Stelmach, Yitzchak Ben Yisrael, Madeline Blake, Rachel Barcelona, Corey Brown, Kara Smoley, Fotios Rallis, Chana Esther Bat Ayala Hadar. And if you have a specific name that you would like to include, if you would indicate that now, Alex can unmute you one by one.
Yeah, Bruce.
Charles Wargo.
Sue.
Bryce, Bocchini, Bruno, and Laurie Schurz.
Eve. Oh, hold on, Eve. You need to unmute yourself.
So complicated. Leslie Perrin.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike.
Dina Baracha, Bat Miriam.
Janet, if you want to unmute yourself. Oh. Sorry,
Kathleen Lyons.
Great, thank you. Bob Mandel.
Selima Joan Staley, Kurt Curtis, Daniel Salinas, Carol Freeband.
Thank you. Barry.
Josh Haskins.
And Mom, did I see your hand too?
Devorah Sosana Bat Matilda.
Anyone else have a name they wanted to include? Okay, got everyone. And of course, you know, as Sharon put it, there is a lot more people in the world who need our healing, or who need healing and who need our prayers for healing beyond what we could hope to include just by saying names one by one. And so let's just take another couple seconds to send those prayers out and our thoughts for healing out into the world. Sharon, whenever you're ready.
Ba'avur she'anach mitpalalim ba'avuram, b'shchar zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim aleihem, lahachalimam u'lerapotam, ולהחזיקם ולהחיותם, וישלח להם מהרה רפואה שלמה מן השמיים, רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף. שבת מליזות ורפואה קרובה לבוא, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ונאמר
Amen. Thank you, Sharon. And before we continue, I'd like to share, as you all know, this is kind of the point in our services where we include prayers for kind of other things that are going on, or other places where our attention might be pulled, to offer up some prayer and some intention and some hope. And again, I'm not going to pretend that Election Day isn't on Tuesday. I know we're all here for maybe a little bit of a relief from that, but I also think that in coming together to gather collectively and to pray collectively, we have the opportunity to kind of elevate some good intentions as far as that goes collectively as well. And talking about lots of people needing our prayers, that doesn't apply just for healing. That obviously applies also at a time when there are a lot of just contentions and bitterness and divisiveness going through our country. And certainly on Tuesday, a lot of people will need our collective prayers and our collective strength, whether that's people who need to go out and vote and potentially wait in long lines, or potentially face all sorts of confusion or intimidation or anything else, whether that's the people who are responsible for counting the votes and announcing results under a tremendous amount of pressure, really whichever way things go, and also really to all of us who are feeling stressed and are feeling anxious and really need to be there to support each other and hold each other up as well, in so many ways. And not just obviously the 20-something people who are with us right now, but all the people whose lives we touch, friends and family and everyone else. And so I'd like to offer up, this is a prayer for brotherhood, unity, and friendship. It's composed by a rabbi named Tamar Elad Applebaum, who is a rabbi in Israel. I see Sharon smiling. Is that because of this particular rabbi, or just something else? Sorry, not to put you on the spot.
I just really like the name.
Great. Wonderful. That's a great start. It is a beautiful name. And so she actually, from what was forwarded to me with this prayer, she actually composed this a couple last year before an Israeli election, because obviously Israeli society knows what it's like to have divisive and contentious elections, that they have no idea what the outcome will be or what it will mean. But her words have been modified a little bit for our context. But certainly I think, very, very applicable in this moment. And Barry and Sue have already heard this because I read it before the board meeting. It is a little bit, and Bob, sorry, Bob was there too, but you get to hear it again. It is a little bit long, but I certainly think it's worth reading in its entirety this morning. So this is a prayer for brotherhood, unity, and friendship. And her inspiration for this comes from a quote from Psalms, Laman achai v'rayai, for my brethren and my friends, which there's a beautiful tune for. Maybe we can do it at the end if people are interested. Ruler of all worlds, God of mothers, fathers, and children, God of the righteous and the pious, God of all, show mercy to me and grant that I be able to love peace and to cherish it above all else. When I encounter someone whose opinions are directly contrary to my own, or when to embrace that person peacefully feels an absolute impossibility, or when I encounter two individuals who are each other's polar opposites, keep me from saying that I am being asked to do the impossible. Let me ever recall that I can make peace in the world through words spoken to reconcile opponents, just as you yourself managed to do by bringing together water and fire, two irreconcilable entities. And yet in their impossible admixture were born the heavens themselves, such that to be truly God-fearing means to admit the possibility of reconciling them nonetheless. Grant me the grace ever to work towards reconciliation and to grant others the benefit of the doubt, even when those others are causing me personal pain by disagreeing with me so intensely. You, God, who is good and who does good, ever grant that I view others generously and kindly, and watch over me lest I succumb to the unwarranted hatred of others. Be compassionate with our generation and save us from pain and suffering, lest we, God forbid, uproot each other or abandon each other. Let us be responsible for each other and concerned for each other in the manner of brothers and sisters bound by familial ties to reconcile, for reconciliation's sake, and to foster bonds of true friendship between us. And turn our hearts toward you, God, and turn our hearts towards each other. Grant us the ability to love you, God, wherever we find ourselves, and to love other people wherever they find themselves. Be with us, God, and gracefully grant us to share in your divine patience, so that we exist in a state of peace with the world. May the God who makes peace in the heavens grant us with compassion that we too know peace, we and all Israel and the whole world. Blessed are you who listens to heartfelt prayer. And we will continue. I'm going to hand it over to Judy Matthews, who has volunteered to read the Haftarah for us this morning. Again, I think, you know, if you read through the words of the Haftarah in English, if you follow along, I think it really kind of matches up in this week's Parsha, in that this is really the week where we start to see the Torah turning into the Torah, right? Of all those recurring themes coming out. And I think we see a lot of this in this week's Haftarah, and I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Mom and invite you to follow along.
So I just want to say that having a Haftarah, reading a Haftarah by Isaiah, who's the prophet of comforting and consolation, really provides a timely aspect for me as well. And going over the Haftarah this morning and having some going through some really difficult words, but then under some of those difficult words really had to do with some beautiful language of God, particularly verse 10 in chapter 41, where God is really personally connecting and appearing in a much more intimate way. And I just found that very meaningful for me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei ha'emet v'hatzedek. Lama tomar Yaakov u'tedaber Yisrael nistera darki me'Adonai u'me'Elohai mishpati yavor halo yadata im lo shamata Elohei olam Adonai borei kitzot haaretz lo yi'af v'lo yiga ein cheker litfunato notein laya'ef koach u'le'ein onim atzma yarbeh v'yafu ne'arim v'yiga'u u'vachurim kashol yikashelu v'kovei Adonai yachlifu chawach Yalu ever kancharim, Yarutsu v'lo yiga'u, Yelchu v'lo yi'afu, Hacharishu elayim, ולאומים יחליפו כוח, יקשו אז ידברו יחדיו, למשפט נקרבה. מהעיר ממזרח, צדק יקראהו לרגליו, ייתן לפניו גויים ומלכים ירד, ייתן כעפר חרבו, כקש נידף קשתו, ירדפן יעבור שלום, אורח ברגליו לא יבוא, מפעל ועשה, קורא הדורות מראש. אני אדוני ראשון, ואת אחרונים אני הוא. ראו איים ויראו, קצות הארץ יחרדו, קרבו ויעתיון. איש את רעהו יעזורו, ולאחיו יאמר חזק. ויחזק חרש את צורף, מחליק פטיש את הולם פעם, אומר לדבק טוב הוא, ויחזקהו במסמרים לא ימוד. ואתה ישראל עבדי יעקב אשר בחרתיך, זרע אברהם אוהבי, אשר החזקתיך מקצות הארץ, ומאציליה קראתיך, ואומר לך עבדי אתה, בחרתיך ולא מאסתיך, אל תירא כי עמך אני, אל תשתח כי אני אלוהיך, אימצתיך, אף עזרתיך, אך תמכתיך בימין צדקי, הן יבושו ויקלמו כל הנחרים בך, יהיו כעין ויאבדו אנשי ריבך, תבקשם ולא תמצאם, אנשי מצותך, יהיו כעין וכאפס אנשי מלחמתך, כי אני אדוני אלוהיך מחזיק ימינך, האומר לך אל תירא אני עזרתיך, אל תראי תולעת יעקב מתי ישראל, אני עזרתיך נאום אדוני וגואלך קדוש ישראל, הנה שמתיך למורג חרוץ חדש, בעל פיפיות, תדוש הרים ותדוק, וגבעות כמות תשים, תזרח ברוח תישאם, ושערה תפיץ אותם, ואתה תגיל באדוני, בקדוש ישראל תתהלל. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אחור לא ישוב ריקם, כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו, ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך, במהרה יבוא ויגן ליבנו, על כיסאו לא ישב זר ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים מכבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד, על התורה ועל עבודה ועל נביאים, ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה, אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mom. Yashkal, beautiful as always. And yeah, thank you for doing that. I will also say out loud, at the risk of, again, slightly embarrassing my mother, which is something a child doesn't usually get the opportunity to do. She has talked about wanting, if there is anyone with Hebrew skills already, who is interested in learning a little bit more about how to do Haftorah or Haftorah Trup. I don't think she's necessarily willing to teach from the ground up if you can't read Hebrew. But if your Hebrew skills are there and you want to learn a little bit more about reading a Haftarah, reach out to my mom. And that whether if you don't have her email, let me know and I will get you her email. But thanks again, Mom. It's wonderful to have you doing that for us. So we are running a little bit behind, but I do want to talk about Malchi Tzedek just a little bit, since I said we would talk about Malchi Tzedek a little bit. And I do think, again, we talked about how much there is in the core in this week's Parsha that really is like the core of Abraham and Sarah's kind of foundational stories and the foundational stories of Judaism. But I do think that this 5 verses here is really fascinating. And especially given, our triennial cycle and how we only kind of visit this text in detail every 3 years, I want to take the opportunity to kind of zoom in on these couple verses and this kind of strange interlude for just a couple minutes. So I'm going to read the verses once more that we're going to take a closer look at. So we're in chapter 14, verses 17 to 21. And this is, of course, right after this war of the 4 kings and 5 kings and Abraham kind of turning the tides and coming out victorious. When Abram returned from defeating Chedar Lomar and the kings with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shabbat, which is the valley of the king. And King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand." And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself." So right off the bat, there's a couple kind of really just notable and distinct things about the passage itself and where it falls, and also about this character of Melchizedek. So the first one is, of course, that Melchizedek is the king of Salem. And we're not talking about Salem, Massachusetts, even though it's appropriate that we mention it on Halloween. But of course, Salem is such a prominent name because it is related to Jerusalem. And so there is this tradition that the area that Melchizedek was king of included what would later become Jerusalem, which of course, if we read into the commentaries on who he was and whether he was meritorious or righteous or not, one of the things that of course gets, mentioned in his favor is that obviously if he was the king of land that included Jerusalem, he must have been a worthy character. And then of course, there's what I find to be really the most captivating and the most confusing phrase, which is this idea that he was a Kohen Le'el Elyon. He was a priest of God Most High. And we'll come back to that in a minute. And then we just have in the greater context of this passage, it's kind of like a weird aside, right? The verse before has the king of Sodom coming down to talk to Abram. And then before the king of Stone says anything, we get this whole thing of Malchi-Tzedek coming out and offering Abram food, and then we finally go back to the king of Stone. So it's this weird kind of like what happened here, that the events are so interrupted, and kind of it seems like we're jumping back and forth a little bit. And because of that, and because of this, this placement and this bit of strange context, we're kind of led to compare Malchi-Tzedek to two different characters. We're led to kind of compare and contrast him with Abram, but we're also led to compare and contrast him with the king of Stone. And as I mentioned earlier, Stone or Sodom really becomes like the embodiment of evil and just kind of all things bad in the narrative of Genesis. And when we compare Malchi-Tzedek to the king of Stone, that's really where we're able to build up his righteousness, right? Malchi-Tzedek wasn't directly involved in the war in this same way. He owes Abram nothing, but he comes to meet him with food and drink, right? He comes to meet him kind of with gifts and hospitality and kind of some comfort after the campaign of the war. Meanwhile, the king of Stone, who Abram saved in this war, really owes Abram everything. And yet the first thing he says when he actually comes to talk to him is, give me the persons and you take the possessions for yourself. And so we see the contrast between kind of what it is to be greedy, what it is to kind of be nefariously planning, what it is to be ungrateful, versus what it is to be outgoing, what it is to be generous, what it really is to be kind of righteous and commendable. And so the classic interpretation for why this story is so all over the place is, we're about to move into the narrative of why Stone is so evil. Next week, we'll see the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And the Torah might not say in the text that the king of Stone was a wicked man, but we see by the text being placed kind of next to and within each other, just kind of what exactly was the downfall of this kingdom and of this man who led the kingdom. But when we compare Malchi-Tzedek to Abram, the lessons are perhaps a little bit less clear and less straightforward. What exactly does it mean to be a priest of the God Most High, but also still a king of another nation? And what does it mean to be a priest of God Most High, of a Kohen El Elyon? Really, at this time when we are establishing Abram as like the one acolyte of this God. And so it's really just a kind of mysterious and fascinating connection here. And it also brings, at least to my mind, a couple different passages throughout the Torah. Again, we're talking about patterns and resonances. The other two characters in the biblical narrative who immediately came to my mind is, of course, Yitro, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, who is a Midianite priest, but also clearly has connections to Moses' God and the God of the Israelites, and has some recognition that God is to be elevated, even though it might not be in the like strict monotheistic sense that, that Moses and the Israelites do. And also, I think it also just bears mentioning kind of the story of Bilam and Balak and priests or prophets of other nations who come to bless, obviously that's the story with the weird talking donkey and the blessing that he doesn't necessarily mean to come out of his mouth when he blesses the Israelites. But clearly for Malchi-Tzedek, this is a very intentional blessing. But I think it's interesting to think of this as the first example of a blessing coming from outside, outside the people or outside a strict kind of the strict blessing ability of God. And there are, of course, many midrashic the midrashim on this parsha and on like every facet of the story of Abraham and the story of Sarah, and there is so much out there. Like there are basically books that kind of describe stories and characteristics that really aren't in the text, and you know, whatever kind of 25 or 30 pages we get in the Chumash, you get 10 times that if you go through the midrashic literature. And so we do get a little bit more kind of creative insight into who this character of Melchizedek might have been. There is one popular midrashic explanation that says that Melchizedek was actually Shem, one of Noah's 3 sons, Noah's oldest son, and actually Abram's great, you know, times however many generations, grandfather. And initially, at least, Kohen, in the context of Melchizedek, who was Shem, is meant to mean Kohen, that at some point God kind of intended the Israelite priesthood to be traveling down through the line, directly through the line of Shem, and that we can almost picture it as kind of like Abram and his great-great-grandfather, almost as like the original Moses and Aaron, right? That like Abram was going to be the leader, but Shem was going to be the priest. But they really zoom in on the first line of Melchizedek's blessing, which is Baruch Avram le'el Elyon, blessed be Abram of God Most High. And even though it seems like those are beautiful and complimentary words, they say that he made a major slip up in putting Abram's name before God's name. And in that moment of kind of either accidentally or not elevating Abram before God, that is when Melchizedek kind of forfeited the priesthood and hands it back to Abram. And so that's when Abram, you know, becomes kind of the one progenitor of all of Israelite society, including the priesthood, and it all comes from that, you know, apparently small just reversal of words. And the other understanding of Melchizedek and his priesthood is that he believes in God, and believes in God certainly as an elevated God and a true God, but also within his own system of polytheism. So instead of seeing God as the one and only God, he sees God as the one and great God who kind of still sits above and rules over all the other gods, which obviously, you know, it's a little bit difficult what to make of that. It obviously is not monotheism, and it obviously is not what we're kind of told that Abram believes in and is the reason that Abram is so venerated a character. But it also, I think, is pretty clearly something that elevates him above the rest of the society around him. And I think it's especially striking within the context of Lecha and the covenants that Abram is making with God. We often think of Abram and Sarai as the only ones who kind of got it at the time, the only ones who understood what God was and what God wanted. But through Melchizedek, I think we see that God can play a role in other people's lives, and other people can choose to believe in God too, within their own systems of beliefs, even if they are not exactly, you know, what Abram believes in and what Sarai believe in, and what leads the Jews, or what leads the Israelites to become this kind of chosen and elevated people. And this is actually exactly what Rabbi Yitz Greenberg writes about in reflecting on this week's Parsha. He writes that chosenness says nothing about superiority or special quality in the chosen one. It simply means that Abram and Sarai and Jewry, feeling the love of God, took on a partnership role. They were faithful to it for thousands of years and carry on the mission of Tikkun Olam. We should be proud that that vision has been internalized and pursued by others, and we are not diminished by others taking up of this task. And so I just want to kind of end on that thought of thinking what exactly it means for Abram and Sarai to be kind of choosers and chosen and believers, but also not necessarily the only believers and the only choosers and the only ones who can be chosen. And whether that kind of changes our thoughts on this whole story, or what that might bring into the context. And Sharon, I saw your hand go right up, so please unmute yourself and share.
Yeah, I'm thinking about all of this in context of everything that comes before it. And in a sense, really throughout the whole Torah, the whole idea of Yetzer HaTov, Yetzer Hara, that people are good and people have an inclination towards evil. And it's not a simple thing. I mean, it's not like you're the good guys and you're the bad guys. And in a sense, I feel like this little piece almost just reinforces that again. You know, you don't have to be Jewish to be right, or to be good, or to be tzedek, to be just. And you don't have to be Avram, and you don't have to be the king of this or the king of that. It's much more complicated than that. And a person who's good is a person who's good. I love his name. I mean, Malki Tzedek, the king of Tzedek, and also Melech Shalem. I don't know if anyone, I mean, if this is even really right, but Shalem is just such a wonderful word related to shalom, to peace, to wholeness. And so I feel like there's some way that this resonates as a little capsule in the midst of this whole struggle for understanding wholeness that includes good and evil and inclinations one way and another way, and that people are complex. And what you said about Avram in the very beginning, way before any of this, that, you know, he's a hero, but also does some pretty awful, reprehensible things, that none of it is simple. You can't just reduce it to this one's good and this one isn't good.
Yeah, and I think, I think that's a really great message for us to remember, right? Like, even when we dig down a little bit into like the covenants, into the promises, like it's not really promised that to Abram and Sarai that their inheritors will inherit everything, right? We really do focus on the land of Israel, and it's never kind of the goal of Judaism to say everyone on the earth shall become Jewish and we will have this really uniform society where everything will be good, right? Like, it's always kind of our mission and our challenge to be good and encourage others to be good and make the world a better place, but not in a way that's kind of that's negating that things that are different from us can also be good. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Bruce, I see if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, I agree with what you were just saying very much. I see this, the idea of being chosen as in contrast to other religions which say we are the only way. Like you go to Christianity, it's the only way you'll be saved is through Christ, they say. Or you go to Islam, and the only way to be saved is to follow, I am the prophet and I'm the only prophet. And here, there's nowhere in Judaism, I think, where it says it's the only way. It says this is over and above normally being a human being. You're chosen to be more holy, or you are choosing to be more holy.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like I don't, as usual, I don't want to go too deep into what other religions believe, because I just don't feel like I have the comfortable knowledge base to share that quite yet. But I do think that, like, for Jews, it's always about, right, this is the path for us. And really, I think what you said, Bruce, like, we're not a proselytizing people. It's like, if you come to this, this is what we believe in, and this is what we want for ourselves. but yeah, we really don't have necessarily that like trying to erase everything else that's out there. And there are, there is really interesting kind of relationships and guidelines for what exactly Jewish religion or like Jewish biblical religion doesn't tolerate, right? Like there's a big difference between kind of how even like going way back to the Torah and the Mishnah and the Talmud, like the difference between a different monotheistic religion and polytheistic religions, because definitely there, Judaism does kind of take very, very close to its core the idea of there being only one God, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So there, how we relate to everything else that's out there does vary a little bit. But yeah, well, thank you for bringing that in. Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, just a little bit, and I think Joel probably knows more about what I'm about to say than I do. But in Japan, it's not. You can be multiple religions. You can observe Christmas and Shintoism and Buddhism and whatever. And to some extent in China, I think also there's not just one path or one. It's not inconsistent to be several religions at the same time, and so I think like the three religions that Judaism and Christianity and Islam is a little different path of how they came to be as opposed to the religions of the Far East that are like that.
Yeah, and I mean I do also think it's worth pointing out in this context and in this conversation, right? Like, I know the ins and outs of Judaism much better than I know the ins and outs of any other religion. And so, like, if someone were to say Judaism believes this, I might say, well, one section of Judaism believes this, and another section of Judaism believes this, and a third section, says this and has these set of practices. I imagine that across the spectrum of Christianity and Islam and everything else, right, there is that same kind of spectrum. And I think, even just the different churches that I work with and religious organizations that I work with and kind of their own diversity of beliefs and how, even they might push back a little bit to some of the things we're saying and really how there is a lot more kind of diversity of belief and opinion in all of them and thinking a little bit to, both the shared heritage that we have and where we, might separate and go our own ways. So, yeah, and I think there's obviously plenty of room in these conversations for interacting with the interfaith community and figuring out, having these conversations with people of other faiths and, getting into a little bit deeper instead of kind of guess, me saying that I don't know well enough what they would say to represent what they would say, but actually asking them directly and hearing those voices and making the conversation a little bit bigger. I think there's a lot of really good opportunity for that. Any other thoughts or comments or questions before we move towards the end of the service? Wonderful. Well, thank you all. I'm going to close the arc. And we will continue with the Kaddish Shalem, which I'm not going to put up on the screen, but I do invite you all to unmute yourselves to respond to the Kaddish. Let me just find the button. Yitkala v'yikadash me'rabah.
Amen.
Almad yivrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei b'chaychon v'yamachon v'chay l'chol beit Yisrael b'agala b'zman kariv v'meru. Amen.
Amen.
Shmei Rabba.
Shalom me'ol me'ol maya.
Erdach.
Yitbarach v'shabach, yitbar v'trom menaseh, v'gadar v'toal, shmei d'kudisha, b'ri. Eilam b'chata v'shirata, t'shchata v'nechamata, d'amiran be'alma v'meru.
Amen.
Kabel tonodon, d'chol beit Yisrael, kadam v'hon d'mishmaya v'meru.
Amen.
Sham rab min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu, v'akol Yisrael v'meru.
Amen.
Yaseh shalom mimromav, hu yaseh
Yaseh
shalom aleinu,
shalom.
v'akol Yisrael, v'akol Yisrael tevel v'meru.
Amen.
And I'm going to put everyone back on mute, and we will continue with the Aleinu, which I will put up on the screen. Just give me 1 second here. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, late gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot hadama, shelo sam chelkenu kahen, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, vanachnu korim, umishtachavim, umodim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yoseh la'aretz u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim imal shchinatu zo v'gavhei meromim hu Eloheinu einod emet malkeinu efes ulato kakatuv b'torato v'yadata yom v'hashevota el levavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim imal v'al haaretz mitachat einod kakatuv b'toratecha v'naim loch le'olam va'ed V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. And in just a moment, I'll invite people to unmute to join me in the Mourner's Kaddish. This week, Congregation Avas Achim marks the Yortzeitin of Benny Pastor, William Perlman, Helen Wintner, Bertha Edelstein, Lola Eigen, Nathan Assan, and Florence Siegel. May their memories be a blessing. Please join me in the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal
Yikadash Shemei Rabbo Yomo Divrokiru Shei Yamlik Malkutei Dechayekon Yomekon V'chaye Dekol Beit Yisrael V'Goladi Zman Kori V'Imru Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbo Mevorach Leolam Olamei Omaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudshah b'richu ve'elam min kol birkotov v'shirata tushbekata v'nekmata d'amiram b'yoma v'imru amen. Hey Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'romav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Anyone who is standing may be seated. I'm going to put you all back on mute one more time. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here. Just a couple of announcements looking forward to the week ahead. First of all, for anyone who signed up for the women's group fundraiser for the vegetables from Max Farm and challah baked by me, pickup for that will be tomorrow morning at the shul from 9 to 11. If you can't make that window, send Mac or I an email. We'll figure out delivery. Thank you all who participated. And if anyone would still like to participate, just shoot me an email. There is no shortage of carrots yet. Thank God. And then follow up on that on Thursday evening, there will be a soup making. I don't even know if it's a class or more of kind of a collaborative group effort. Everyone is welcome to that, whether you are a member of the women's group or not, whether you participated in the fundraiser or not. So that'll be Thursday at 6. Before Thursday, obviously, comes Tuesday and Election Day. On Election Day morning, we will be having a reasonably short morning service. When I say reasonably short, we're definitely talking shorter than today. We're shooting probably for like 45 minutes or so. We're gonna do a short semi-traditional morning service, and then Joel's gonna lead us in meditation afterwards. So that'll be 7:30 on Tuesday morning. All are of course welcome. And we're not going to have adult ed on Tuesday night because people let me know that they thought they would be a little bit too distracted or otherwise engaged. But there are some really wonderful learning opportunities within the Jewish community going on throughout the day on Tuesday. So please just take a close look at the e-blast this week. There'll be a lot of different things in there. I forget if it's Hartman or Hadar, but one of those great New York Jewish learning institutions they're calling it a tikkun, an election night tikkun. So for people who want to kind of be learning Torah instead of be glued to their TVs or their Facebook accounts or their Twitter accounts or whatever it is, they're going to have, I think, 3 hours of learning available from like 8 to 11. So I'll put that in the e-blast in case anyone is looking for it. Yeah, and I think we'll just spend our week kind of hoping for the best and making sure that we're supporting each other. And, I am around and available. And I'm also happy, we chose Tuesday morning to have a minyan to be able to start what will be a relatively anxious day with a little bit of hope and togetherness. And if people feel like they want other spaces throughout the week, please let me know. If I feel like I need to make an executive decision to open up another space during the week, I will let you all know. But I'm going to do my best to make myself available and around and respond to the needs of our community. So just keep that in mind as we head into this week. Yeah, Mike.
Wow. 2 things. Zadie over here, Jerry, is being honored tomorrow by the Regional Men's Club Federation as our annual winner of honoree of the Keeper of the Flame Award. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Jerry. It's well deserved. Also, don't forget to turn your clocks back.
Yes. Thank you for both of those reminders. And of course, Mazel Tov to Jerry. I can't believe you haven't been Keeper of the Flame before. But yeah, very, very excited for you. And if anyone doesn't know exactly what we're talking about or needs the information to be able to go to the service, send me an email and I'll try to get you hooked up with that after Shabbat. Yeah, Deb.
For a number of reasons, I'm reluctant to turn my clock back. Who needs an extra hour of 2020?
Well, it's a great question, but I know that I speak for at least one other Matthews in the room who I know will be very excited to be able to have the sun come out, not at 7:30 like it's doing these days, but it'll be nice to get up early with the sun again. But yeah, great little note of humor there. Thank you. Yeah, and otherwise, the Hanukkah candle fundraiser is still going. It's been really successful, but as we think about coming together for Hanukkah, it would be really nice if we're all lighting the same candles. I spoke on Rosh Hashanah about how kind of candle flame is a really good way to unify us across space. And so if everyone in the CAA community is looking down and lighting the same candles, I think that's a really beautiful image and opportunity for us all. So that's still going. And I think that's about it. Before we conclude with Hatikva, Mike requested in the chat that we actually sing Leman Achai V'Ra'ai, which I referenced as the source for Rabbi Elad Applebaum's prayer, which comes from Psalms. There's a beautiful Carlebach tune to it. I don't know if I can quite do it justice or if I know the tune for the whole thing, but I can at least start give the first kind of verse or two a go. And of course, just one more time, Leman Achai V'Ra'ai, which can be translated as for my brothers and friends, because of my brothers and friends, for the sake of my brethren and friends. And it's, yeah. So I'll try it. And if anyone wants, a link to a better sung version, I will get you one after Shabbos. Leman achai v'rei, leman achai v'rei, adabrana, shalom bach, leman achai v'rei, leman achai v'rei, adabrana, adabrana, shalom bach, leman beit Adonai Eloheinu avak shata leman beit Adonai Eloheinu avak shata. With that, I invite folks to rise. Like I said, if you Google Leman Achai V'Rei, you will find much more beautiful and on-key renditions, but I wanted to bring it in. Thank you, Mike, for encouraging me.
Thank you. It's in the Sim Shalom Siddur towards the end, this part of the service.
Great. So if you would like, please rise and we'll conclude with Hatikva. Kol od ba'alevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiyah ulefate mizrach kadima ayin letzion sofia od lo avda tikvateinu hatikva bat shnot alpayim liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion Yerushalayim liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion Yerushalayim ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam berit olam ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam berit olam Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam berit olam Ki shesh yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam berit olam u'beyom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam berit olam Al kein barach Adonai et yom haShabbat v'yikadshehu savri
L'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam borei peri hagafen
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam